So I want to tell you the story behind my Head Hutt here. I'm sitting off to the back side of it. I'm going to be doing a series of stories so you can kind of get to know the whole project as I go along. I'm going to start today with how it started, basically. I'm going to go into why it started in a different time, but how it started was initially I drove a piece of rebar into the ground just kind of right over here and made a circle, and you can kind of see the remnants of the tire wall circle here, I think. I'm going to turn this way. No, I'm not. It won't let me. So I pounded a piece of rebar, and I had a piece of rope that had a knot in it that was measured out to be 7 feet. I think it was 8 feet actually, because I wanted a 12-foot round opening, and I was putting in over a 2-foot thick tire wall, retaining wall, with a slope to it. And so being that was going all the way around, that's actually 4 feet extra plus so yeah, I guess I must have made it an 8-foot rope basically. And then I made a big circle like that with that so that it was 16 feet around, which gave me the extra 4 feet for my tire retaining wall. I marked off that circle and I started digging. And actually I also started pounding these tires, and some friends of mine came by. I had a little cookout that day, and we had a tire pounding party, and actually knocked out like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 on one row, and probably more than 15, about 20 on the other row. I think we got almost all the way around. So like 4 young men and myself, we managed to knock out, maybe it was 5 or 6, I can't remember. I think it was 4 plus me, working pretty hard that day for a few hours, and we knocked out a bunch of tires really well as a team. And then the city showed up and asked, "What are you doing?" And I happened to be inside, and my friend said, "Oh, we're building a shed." And the city didn't like that answer because it was actually not in the right spot. It was interesting because they didn't call me on the tire wall, although they may have later without an engineer approval, but what they called me on was just it being in the right spot from the line. Even though I had read it a bunch of times, somehow I had confused the alley line with the front line. It's kind of based on how all the other houses were building their garages up against the back area there. I thought that there was no easement against that line, but it turns out there's a 10-foot easement and none on the other alley line. So that was one of my first big delays in this project, and it lasted, I don't know, like 6 months probably that tacked on while I argued with the city and tried to change my plan and talk to an engineer and see what the engineer would approve as far as a dome structure without a center beam support, and kind of got into it with him and ended up just deciding I was going to make it a giant sculpture and not get it permitted. So that is what I did. And so then the next step was that I had to move. I had a shed. Here, I'm going to show you the shed. It's over here. I don't know if you can see that. See this shed here? Yeah, this shed is it's a heavy shed. It's no joke. And and it was back here against this wall. Let me show you. We're gonna go for a little walk. So the shed was right here against this wall, and so to move, and part of why I had, the plan for that wall, that's the tire wall that I was talking about initially, was because I was trying to miss the shed here, because hadn't occurred to me about moving it. But then when faced with this new challenge, I decided that I would move it. And so Rocket and I were we were running. He was running, pulling me on my bike a little bit. I was riding my bike, getting him to run. It's Rocket Dog, you just heard him there. We used to go for runs with the bike, and we went for a run, and this moving truck didn't see us. It just didn't register. You know how that saying about the ships not being recognized because people didn't know what it was. Well, it was like that with me and my dog. This guy just looked right through us basically because we were running pretty fast down the road, me on my bike and Rocket in front of me. And so I got in front of the truck as he was looking, he looked toward me, didn't see me, looked the other way, and then looked back this way right as I came in front of him, and he started driving this big, it was a giant yellow moving truck, and I could literally like feel the back, I could feel the engine, the fan of his engine on my back as I was pedaling, and hear it roaring, and I could see him, his face just above the hood of the truck, because it was a pretty big semi-truck, and so I was yelling at him like, hey, 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 but he wasn't looking at me, he was looking the other way as he was turning, and so I started pedaling across the street for the sidewalk, not knowing what else to do, kind of saw my life flash before my eyes, realized that I might die under this truck because there was very little chance I was going to survive or not be seriously injured if it hit me, so I dropped the leash, and Rocket made it to the other side, to the sidewalk, and I hit the curb and flew into the air as I hit the curb, and I had a bike helmet on, a red helmet, and when I flew in the air, the red of the helmet caught the guy's attention somehow, and I heard the screech of the brakes as I was in the air, and if he hadn't have screeched on the brakes, he would have just squished me probably, or who knows where I would have fallen in with regard. But when I got up off the ground, I had a lot of adrenaline pumping, and my dog, Rocket, was loose, and he was excited and confused because of all the yelling and the screeching, and so he started to go for this old lady that was watching the whole thing, but hadn't seen me because I was hidden by the moving truck from her view, and so she just heard yelling and then saw me fly through the air and then saw this big dog, this Rottweiler type dog coming at her, and so I got up and I got the dog, and then the guy basically accused me of jumping out in front of him. He was like, what, were you hiding in the bushes? Which there weren't even any bushes there. But in any case, I was so happy to be alive because I really thought I was going to die for a few seconds there. So I was just kind of laughing and, checking my legs and seeing that they were indeed, I was like, oh, yep, they still work. And he's like, all right, and I was bleeding in my knees, but I was still, my knees worked. And he was like, do you want me to call somebody? Are you okay? And I was like, no, I just want to get home. I wanted to get Rocket home. And so I pedaled my bike home. And then actually later when I got it home, I realized it was so messed up, it wasn't even pedalable. So I don't know how I pedaled it home other than I just had this huge amount of adrenaline that I used to pedal it, despite the fact that the gears were all bent and the chain thing was bent. I don't even know how I got it, because later when I tried to ride it, it was completely locked up and I had to have a friend hammer it out for me. But in any case, that was kind of a long anecdotal story about how I gained the adrenaline to move that shed over there. See, there it is, from over here. And I bought 3 big metal poles. I could show you those. I think I still have them. I bought these 3 metal poles at Home Depot. I kind of thought it all through. And I thought I'm going to jack up the shed and put those poles under it and roll it on these metal poles like rollers. And so I went to Home Depot, found some poles. I didn't know what I would find, but I found these. I'll show you right here. They are, they're like condo. I forget what they're even called now. They're these thicker ones. They're like 2.5 or 3 inches. I forget. They were a little bit expensive, like $25 each. And I didn't. So I went with the little bit smaller ones than I would have liked to, maybe because they were more expensive than I thought, and I've been on a tight budget this whole time. But and part of my intention with this also was to build it for as little as possible, to demonstrate a very low budget, high labor intensive project that anybody could do themselves if they really wanted to. So I jacked up the shed and I got my 3 bars under it, and I tried to push it, and it wouldn't budge for like a whole day almost. I just wore myself out. I was literally had my back against this wall here and my feet up against the back of the shed, and just with my whole might was trying to press, body press, leg press the shed on those rollers, and it wouldn't budge. And so finally I decided, well, I'm just gonna jack it up as high as I can get it on the jack, and then kick it off the jack and see if I can move it that way. So when I did that, it turned out there was a little stump under there that was hung up on the underneath one of the floor boards, support boards of the shed. So once I kicked it off of there and got it off over that stump, it turned out it rolled just like I envisioned it really well. It was still a lot of work though, and it took me a whole day to roll it. I had to roll it out this way, and then I had to roll it across my yard, which was a little uphill basically, and then I had to turn it 90 degrees. That was like the hardest part. I think it took me 3 days total. One day of thinking it out and getting the bars, and one day of pushing futilely, and then finally getting it off of there and getting it all the way across my yard, and then almost another day to get it turned 90 degrees and synced into that little place there. That was really tricky. And at the end of me turning it, my jack, I had my jack on a piece of, I had already gone through 2 jacks, jacking it up and moving it, because my jacks were shitty, I guess. It wasn't really that hard on jacks, I don't think, other than the turning, I would jack it up and kick it off of it, and basically was pretty hard on the jack. So I was down to a little jack with about 6 inches of play, a little hydraulic jack that I had, and I had that sitting on a piece of roofing material, and like it was just about sunset. I was really excited. Just had like 1 more inch to get it exactly where I wanted it, and my jack just sunk into this hole, which was like a cavern over my gas line, turned out, and then the piece of roofing material folded up over the jack, so I couldn't get to the little release valve to get it unstuck from the shed. The weight of the shed was on it, so it was on my gas line. So I was panicking a little bit, inside, but had to try to stay calm, and did, and had to dig it out without the shovel, because now it was near the gas line with my hands, and it was like getting dark. But in the end, I finally left it a half to an inch off of its mark, because I decided it wasn't that important once I got it off the gas line and lived and all. And so there it sits, and there you go with the start of this project story. That is the story of the very start of this. And so just to finish that up, even though I abandoned this initial ring here of tires because of that code, I moved the shed, and then I started with a bar. Look, I can show you the bar, actually. I started with that same piece of rebar. I moved it. Oh, you know what? I'm locked out on this side. I have to take you inside the Head Hutt, which you might enjoy. We'll go in here and I'll show you the piece of rebar. This is my side entrance here. Because it's a sculpture and not a building, it doesn't have to code windows, doors. I am going to put in a safety rail over here, and I don't have one yet, but this is the inside of the Head Hutt. Almost finished. It's been almost finished for quite a while. And this is the downstairs, which I dug out myself. My dog's help, Rocket. And this is the piece of rebar that I set. Actually, this is the piece of rope that I tied around it. I used to mark my line, and then I dug from, and I dug this out, and I dug in 2 rungs, and then put in a retaining wall, tire retaining wall, which I will tell you about in the next video. So I hope you'll come back, watch the whole series. I know this is a little shaky. The sound might be bad, but I'm just gonna get into it and start telling the story, documenting the making of this Head Hutt project, because I have bigger, better projects that I'm about to get to, and I need to wrap this one up. So I hope you enjoyed the story of how I started the Head Hutt. I welcome any of your questions down below. Please subscribe and turn on the notifications bell, wherever it is, if you haven't already, so that you can get notified when I post another video on this series. And until next time, peace, love, and possibilities.